Hello, and welcome to the Future of Tourism podcast. My name is David Peacock, and I'm the Senior Advisor to the Future Tourism Group at Simpleview. January 7th, 2019 was a happy day in Montreal, Canada. My friend and peer, Emmanuelle Legault, was returning to head up marketing for Tourism Montreal after a 3-year sabbatical as the head of international markets at Destination Canada. To say that Emmanuelle is a whiz at international destination marketing and the use of distributed digital platforms to engage and influence travelers would be an understatement indeed. Emmanuelle sees Montreal as a huge playground where creative energy is lived. As she likes to say, we do not visit Montreal, we live it. If you were struck by the parallel between Signe Juergenstelt's Localhood for All proclamation for Visit Copenhagen or Jack Johnson's ardent advocacy for destinations to embrace community shared values, well, that's not surprising at all. While Montreal is indeed an international city, and some would even say the most cosmopolitan city in Canada, it is at its core a local and authentic destination that works really hard to be just that, Montreal. Idiosyncratic, fun and authentic, and one of the driving forces behind the articulation of this wonderful destination is Emmanuelle Legault. As we shift into recovery mode in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis, you might reasonably ask, how does an international cosmopolitan city go about its business in terms of tourism development and marketing in a world so utterly disrupted by the pandemic? Well, the answer to that is less complicated than it might seem. Montreal's success is about being unique and different. It is about the DNA that makes Montreal different from other destinations, not about the amenities that make it the same. In a sense, it's about being hyperlocal and then communicating that local flavor and authenticity to the rest of the world. And that is what Emmanuelle Legault is here to talk about today. Good afternoon, Emmanuelle. How are you?
Bonjour, David. What an intro. Thank you so much.
You earned it. How is it there?
It's been tough. I think it's been tough on all the bigger cities. It's been everybody is wanting to escape, go somewhere else and enjoy the big outdoors. And unfortunately, Montrealers are no different from the rest of the world, where we all want to escape our bigger cities. So it's a challenge right now.
I believe it would be a challenge. When you shift from being a market that sees 40%, 30% of your travelers are inbound from overseas or inbound from the rest of Canada, what are those numbers like usually?
Well, we get about 11 million travelers a year. And I would say that about, 40% of those travelers are from international markets and 60% of them are from Quebec, most of them. The challenge in this case is that even the 60% that would come to Montreal and on a regular basis is not coming either because they don't want to be in these big urban centers. So we're not seeing the international travelers and we're not seeing the Quebecers either in Montreal right now. And our even bigger challenge is that even Montrealers want to flee Montreal. So how do we get our economy going and how do we keep our attractions, our stores alive, our restaurants alive in that context? That's what we really try to focus on. How do we make sure that we keep our Montrealers in Montreal in this context?
So that's a really good point. You've got 18 months, maybe even more of really limited capacity and really limited uptake. But when you talk about focusing on local Montreal, it's actually not that big a shift for you, is it? It's really at the core of what you've been doing for the last 10 years is hyper-local marketing Montreal. We may shift some of the digital skills and the digital focus, but you have been really telling the rest of the world to come to Montreal and be a Montrealer for almost a decade, haven't you?
Absolutely. I would say that while we didn't advertise to Montrealers, all our brand is about Montrealers. We can't. We're not Coca-Cola. We're not a product. We're a city. We're an experience, and the voice that's the most important is the voice of the Montrealers themselves. And visitors, when they come to Montreal, they become Montrealers themselves also. So it's even more important in that case to make sure that we're not trying to push a brand forth. We're trying to push an experience, a Montrealer, a way of life, and let Montrealers tell their own story and their own voice, and not in a Tourism Montreal or a tourism voice. So it's always been about how do we showcase those real Montrealers? How do we give them that voice, those tools, so that they are the ones that market Montreal and not Tourism Montreal markets Montreal?
So when you talk about how do you give them those tools, that has become a pressing and really important aspect of this, which is how do we take operators and make them more capable of helping themselves distribute messaging, which really then becomes the underlying messaging for the destination, right?
It's how do we give our operators absolutely the tools to better showcase Montreal and to showcase it in a tone of voice that is true to Montrealers. But it's also giving our Montrealers those tools. Back in 2009, Tourism Montreal was the first organization to launch a blog, to hire bloggers so that we would really focus on showcasing those unique voices. And it wasn't about a travel brand, it was a bunch of individuals that were telling their own stories in their own voices. We launched the first hashtag Montreal Moments that we still focus on. And when I say give those tools back to Montrealers, is making sure that Montrealers are telling the story of Montreal under the hashtag Montreal Moments. They're sharing those stories on their own social media. They're telling their own way of visiting Montreal, and also, of course, utilizing whatever we're doing in our own developments and giving it back to the community for an attraction to utilize. Whether it's a toolbox or even a way of telling their own story. So we've been really focusing on the last couple of years on trying to get everyone on the same foot on how do we tell that Montreal story. And how do we tell it is you don't visit Montreal, you live Montreal. Like you said it yourself, you said it extremely well. So clearly we did a good job at trying to influence you also.
So when you talk about that in the context of enabling stakeholders to be better at digital, and you talk about working with operators, and you and I've had this conversation before, and you talk about neighborhoods, those are non-traditional role and functions for destination management marketing organizations, aren't they?
They are. And what is interesting is that in the current context, how do we take advantage of the fact that we're not getting visitors to come to Montreal? And how do we rethink then the way we work with our Montrealers and our businesses? So we really joined forces with the city of Montreal, all the different neighborhoods, to really try and relaunch the commercial Montreal. Because it's one thing to try and tell everyone to stay in Montreal, visit parks, go bike riding. It's another one to keep our industry alive and to make sure that even our Montrealers, but even our stakeholders are part of the commercial solution. So how do we get everyone to become a visitor? So it's actually an interesting challenge in the sense that where we used to really showcase Montrealers as the core, the heart of the local experience, what we're now trying to do is tell Montrealers, hey, become a visitor in your own city. Yes, we want you to stay an ambassador, but we also now want you to become a visitor. So how do we get you to spend a little bit of your vacation dollars in the hotels, in the museums, in all the what we would normally think of touristic attractions? How do we get them then and take advantage of this to really become visitors and become better ambassadors at the same time? So when we were rethinking our way of not just a campaign, because I really call it an ecosystem, is we really looked at all the points of contacts with our stakeholders as well as Montrealers. So our website, for example, tomorrow you'll see a new homepage. It's really targeted to what to do in Montreal. It's one thing to talk to a visitor on what to do in Montreal when they don't know Montreal. It's another thing to be relevant to a local. So all of a
Sure.
sudden, a tourism platform has to be engaging and a lot more relevant to a local because they know Montreal. So we have to make sure that what we're putting forth are things that they don't know about, those little hidden gems, those things that are currently open that not necessarily they know they are open. Putting forth the new hotel offers. One of our hotels in Montreal, for example, on Wednesdays and Sundays is offering a cinema in the pool. So you come, you spend the evening at the hotel, and you get to watch a movie outside while you're just floating around in the pool. Those are those new products that are coming out because we're working closely with our stakeholders to think outside the box and think that you're not going to get that visitor from Paris. So what can you do differently for a Montrealer?
So movies in a pool. Why did it take a pandemic to figure that one out? It sounds awesome.
Well, it took a pandemic because why would a Parisian, for example, come to Montreal to watch a movie in a pool? But it's a great story because it's a great story for us also to pitch afterwards to a media outlet or to someone else, like to an influencer, to think, hey, Montreal, we were confined in Montreal, but we had a good time. And that is part of the DNA. How do Montrealers still continue to have a good time? It's by thinking outside the box like that.
Okay, a Parisian may not come to Montreal to watch a movie in a swimming pool, but for someone from Liverpool, England, come on. It's got to be a no-brainer.
Never thought of it this way, but now, hey, you've got a new target for me.
So when you talk about that ecosystem, the shift you made was purposeful, and it's literally to help keep this critical mass of operators and businesses alive so that we can come back and prosper in a future day. But as you do that and you drill into localhood and you drill into what it means, how is that going to change your approach to international marketing when and if it recovers? You must be learning things along the way.
Well, there's quite a few things. First of all, you're building those new relationships that you already had, but more on the surface because it was more of a top-down approach. Here's Tourism Montreal that's going to come out with a new campaign. We have a data management platform. We know where we're going. We know which target audiences are responding well to our ads. To all of a sudden having those conversations with your stakeholders and having much more of a bottom-up approach because we're a lot more in the receiving end in the sense that how can we have that conversation to make sure that we're building a new product together, we're building a new experience together, and how do we deliver a platform that's going to help them? So one of the brainstorms that we were having at one point with our stakeholders were Montrealers were tired. We're all tired after staying at home. We're even more tired than going out and partying all the time. All of a sudden, staying at home made us a lot more tired. Everyone was telling us, please take me by the hand and tell me what there is that I can do. And someone even compared it to an all-inclusive. How can we create an all-inclusive? So when I talk about having that bottom-up approach is all of a sudden we're putting suppliers or operators together so that they create those new specific offers that target those new audiences. And how do we get them talking to really build those new packages to answer a new need, and eventually hoping that that's still going to stay alive when we do start targeting those international travelers again.
So in essence, then, your stakeholder network has gotten at the same time more granular, but potentially more robust.
A lot more robust and a lot more inclusive.
Interesting.
There's always a good thing in each crisis. In this case, I feel that it's been collaboration. Collaboration between the stakeholders to try and find common solutions, but collaborations also with creating those toolboxes, those tools that everybody's going to utilize. When we were coming out and saying, how can we get everyone, all our local community, to talk with one same voice? How do we make sure that there's not a bunch of different campaigns coming out from different neighborhoods? They all have different stories to tell. Each neighborhood has its own DNA, its own experiences. But how do we make sure that it's not a cacophony of different advertising or different communication tools that are not going to do anything because no one really understands. There's too much noise at one point. So when we started talking to each of those neighborhoods and each of these operators, we said, how do we build that giant one approach ecosystem that we all use the same visuals, but we use them differently? And that each of them can own each of those visuals and put their logo, put their own messaging. But around town, you walk around town right now, and there's stencils everywhere in Montreal that says "Relaunch Summer." There's billboards and people are owning these tools. We created, for example, posters where a brasserie. If you come to my brasserie and you enjoyed the experience, well, try this other brasserie that's like 3 doors down or three corners down. So we created these tools to really try and entice people to spread the good word and to make sure that we continue building that economy.
So as we found ourselves in the midst of this crisis, everybody woke up at some point, whether you worked in senior levels of tourism or whether you owned a restaurant, and we said to ourselves, oh my gosh, we are not as digital as we think we should be. You wake up and you're not good at a Zoom call or the like. But I've found that people adapt pretty quickly. Are you finding your operator's digital skill set is growing quickly?
It's unbelievable how quickly it is growing. You're absolutely right. I think that there's been a lot of stepping back, looking at their own digital skill set and their own tools, and evolving the way they communicate with their audiences. And one of the things that what we're trying to do as we're building a lot deeper relationships is how are we going to make sure going forward when we do launch a digital campaign to the UK, we launch it as an industry, and it's not a bunch of operators, or in the US, which is a much closer market. It's not a bunch of operators that are launching their own campaign, their own digital campaign. How do we make sure that we're building, and I'm sorry, I'm going to use the term cookie pool together, so that each operator afterwards can utilize that potential hot lead to convert it eventually. So those conversations that we were not able to have about a year ago, there's an openness to have them right now.
Well, and that's really interesting. I think you've hit on something that I personally feel is one of the most important elements of engagement with stakeholders, which is when you engage a stakeholder, you don't stop. It has to become a lifelong relationship. So you've expanded your stakeholder base. You've integrated more with the things that you do and the things that they do, them coming to meet you on the digital side, you coming to meet them in the neighborhood. It sounds to me that as the tourism management body in Montreal, you intend to keep those stakeholders from here on in, and you intend to work with them. And that's a new future, isn't it?
I think that's definitely a new future. If you work smarter and if you continue to have those conversations, I do think that in the long run, it's going to pay it. And when you say Are we going to keep doing this? I think that there's an even bigger opportunity to expand that to new stakeholders as the markets open up. By that, I mean, how do we utilize those relationships that we have with the destinations that are close to us, Eastern Townships, Le Nord, and so on, so that once we have a traveler that is interested in coming to Montreal, we extend our trip to include a nearby destination, that we start working in much closer collaborations with those other destinations, so that they experience Montreal, but they experience everything that is around Montreal at the same time.
Well, and I think it answers a really important question that's on every DMO's mind, which is, in these times where my output is actually limited by the fact that my uptake is artificially low. There are not enough travelers for the product. There are not enough consumers for the restaurant. We wonder, what's the value of working with these stakeholders? And I think your answer makes it really clear. There's legacy value to this. Going forward, tourism is changed, but our network, our fabric of stakeholders will be stronger than it's ever been, and that will make things like your UK marketing and your cookie pool easier. So I think in there is a message to all of our DMO leaders. Engagement with locals and local entities and local businesses now is legacy value for the future, even if we go back to, broadcast marketing and the like when the time's appropriate.
I think that there's definitely the short-term vision of having or really wanting to be part of the solution to rebuilding your local economy. So engaging with your stakeholders on a very, very short term, so that they stay alive, and that when our visitors are back, we still have all of our restaurants open, and that we still have all of our attractions open and available. But you're right. I think that once you've also had that opportunity to showcase how important the tourism industry is, how important those conversations with your DMO are, and how important it is to build that knowledge pool and that alignment. I think that in the mid and long term, that's going to pay off. And it's even more important to continue to engage in the mid and long term. And it's Destination International has been talking for a while, and a lot of destinations have been talking about the importance of locals in the storytelling and engagement. I find that now it's even beyond just ambassadors. It's a lot more about the locals and the operators working closely into building the better experience, the better tourism product together. And I think that's going to be key in the future.
Well, I love the way you put that. And I will ask you before we get to closing out here, you must have seen some innovative stuff coming from partners who weren't partners before, interesting things. And I've always been excited that when you engage stakeholders, eventually what percolates up is stuff you would never have thought of, that's completely on DNA and works. Have you seen anything that excited you coming out of the local partnerships?
It's actually our Congress Center is a great example. Our Congress Center, empty. There's no events going on right now. So what are they doing? They're actually recreating spaces for Montreal to own. So they've got different pool tables or play games, or making sure that Montrealers come and be part of the space. And their goal is not to do this on a short-term basis. Their goal is that eventually, when events start happening at the Congress Center again, Montrealers are going to be there also as the delegates, so that delegates also experience the real Montreal vibe. So things like that, like making sure that your business is not just a visitor business, but it is part of the Montreal experience. So I find that they've done a great job at that. Absolutely.
I think that's great. Many of us have been to the Congress Center. We had DI there 2 years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic location. I love the idea of it being outfitted for Montrealers, but I love even more the idea that they don't go away when it's solved, that they stay part of the fabric. That's really cool. I want to talk about something personal to you just as we close out. You said something to me, and I know it's part of your own personal ethos, and I thought you might like to share it. You talked about hoping that travel will become more purposeful as we come out of this. So if you want to share on that, great. If you don't, just tell me to go away.
I just hope I'm not going to lose my job. That's the most challenging thing. Our jobs as DMOs is to put heads in beds. And
you do not believe that, and never have, and nor do the people who you work with, who I respect very greatly. We certainly want that to happen, but we don't necessarily believe that's our jobs.
No, you're absolutely right, David. I do think that if we haven't learned coming out of this, that it's even more important to take the time to experience the destination, to experience the culture, to not jump from one airplane to another, and to just live the local community, and just, instead of staying for 2-3 days, staying for a longer period, staying for the right reasons, immersing yourself with what every destination has to offer that is different from one destination to another. And if we travel a little bit less, but for longer periods, and with more purposeful approach in mind, I think that will just become a better industry altogether, and we'll actually learn to even more collaborate amongst ourselves to make those trips even more appealing, more purposeful, and more long term.
Well, I really appreciate that, and it struck a chord with me. I we've all had the luxury of travel, and I like to travel purposefully, but I looked at it through your lens and thought, I'd like to travel more purposefully. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
All right. It's been great having you on. It's always really remarkable to talk to you. Thanks for all your good work at Destination Canada. They're so lucky to have you back in Montreal. I'm sure they agree.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. You have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you for having me, David. It was really great. Thank you.